Hi, this is Lou Covey, editorial director of New Tech Press, and we're doing another part of our series on the outsourcing world for embedded software. Today we're talking with George Slawek, the executive director of Eurocal Group, which is an unusual participant in the outsourcing industry in that they're part of an organization that's considered blended. They have offices in the United States. They do all their customer service in the United States, but they also have a significant number of developers and software engineers that are located in Poland. George, thank you for joining us today.
Well, it's a pleasure, Lou.
So this is becoming a really big deal. I mean, outsourcing is a way of life. That's something we can automatically say. It's not going to go away anytime soon. But there are some rapid changes coming into the world in that, well, for example, China has been seen as a place to do a lot of your outsourcing, mostly in the area of hardware, but there's a lot of software work there. But there's been a trend in the United States where we're seeing Chinese nationals buy up real estate in the United States, especially in the San Francisco Bay Area, as a means to park their money that they've made in the Chinese economic boom in preparation for when the whole thing collapses and they have a place to go, which doesn't bode well for companies that are using Chinese resources. What's a company to do at this point? Where are they supposed to be looking?
Well, I think, as you rightly point out, Lou, outsourcing, is a way of life and has been part of the business and economic structure for really decades, maybe even centuries. But it really kind of took off, particularly when you think about the tech world, the tech industry, in and around the Y2K issue, where Indian firms were very adept in positioning themselves to support companies large and small. For example, I worked at Bank of America in their investment banking division, and we had all sorts of issues and problems and trying to figure out how we would address the Y2K issue. And basically, we outsourced it, as many other corporations and companies did, to companies in India. And that was really a launch pad for the Indian outsourcing industry to build on that experience as a trusted and tested outsourcing destination. Now, since Y2K, since the year 2000, we're now 2014, so that's 14 years ago, 15 years ago. A lot of things have changed, and the Indian outsourcing world has changed, and there are other regions, whether it's Latin America, whether it's Central Eastern Europe, or other parts of Asia that are also showing some prowess and some capabilities for the US companies looking for technical resources that are struggling to find them at home.
It does seem that Central and Eastern Europe are starting to grow as far as where the opportunities are for finding economically feasible outsourcing resources. Do you see that becoming that there's going to become a balance coming soon between the Asian resources and the European resources?
Less so of a balance. I think the key issues here from an Indian perspective, the value proposition that existed 5, 10, 15, 20 years ago has changed. So the having the resources, low-cost resources, technical skills, language capabilities, and some kind of cultural affinity to really work together with, for example, US-based companies. That is a value proposition that has shrunk considerably over the last few years because of the issues that you brought up, whether it's attrition rates in Indian outsourcing companies, the hourly rate, if you will, the challenges, particularly when working with companies who are looking less for coders, but are looking for development, product development, software product development partners. That's the biggest hurdle that many companies, whether they're startups or whether they're medium-sized companies or whether they're Fortune 1000 companies are facing. So to answer your question, where should a company look? It really depends on what they need. If they need dozens or hundreds of coders to execute, to write code for a particular product or to provide support for a particular product, then Asia is probably still the best place to look. Now, it may not necessarily be India. It might be Vietnam. It might be the Philippines. So there are other regions. It may even be China.
Why would they end up looking at Europe then, if all those are available?
Because this is where we really, from a European and from a Polish perspective, come into our own. We provide the right blend for small companies, medium-sized companies, large companies, to work for us to work with them on a partnership basis. Let me take a step back and really kind of focus on what is Central Europe, what is Eastern Europe, because I think there's a lot of misunderstanding in terms of what is Europe and how to describe Europe. And as companies are thinking about, where in Europe should they look to as an attractive outsourcing destination? Should they look to Eastern Europe? And what is Eastern Europe? Eastern Europe is not Poland, is not Hungary, is not the Czech Republic. Eastern Europe are the countries outside of the European Union, which are Belarus, Ukraine, Russia, Moldova, and other former Soviet satellite countries.
Okay.
Now, that's a very different value proposition for companies that are looking to outsource than countries within the European Union, such as Poland, Latvia, Lithuania, Estonia, Czech Republic, Slovakia, Hungary.
So there's a big difference between, so rather than talk about Central and Eastern Europe, we should be talking about EU countries and non-EU countries.
Absolutely, because the value proposition is very, very different, particularly when it comes to IP, intellectual property, management, security, data protection. Projects require the European Union version of a pretty stringent Data Protection Act. So those are two elements, particularly in the data protection and the IP world, that companies really need to look seriously. The last thing a startup wants to see happen is start working with a company in Russia or Belarus or the Ukraine and suddenly see a clone of their product or their service being put on the market because of IP issues.
Yep.
Now, that is as much a cultural thing as it is a legislative thing, but certainly from a legislative and cultural perspective, countries within the EU are a much safer bet for startups, for companies that are developing IP, and we as the Eurocal Group do most of our development projects create IP, which is obviously the ownership of our client, and we want to make sure that the client retains control and ownership of their IP.
Well, George, thank you for this time, and look forward to hearing more about what's going on in Poland.